Tonight, parties pledge tax breaks, but who will pay for them?
The tax cut that will put Canada first.
It's a everyone for themselves approach versus we're all in it together.
People are better off when you elect New Democrats.
The competing campaign promises to put more money in your pocket.
How the hell do you intend to do that?
When the leaders will face off during the campaign and why one debate was canceled. How Donald Trump is keeping Canada guessing ahead of a critical tariff deadline.
Well, I may give a lot of countries breaks.
Holy crap. The massive security blunder by top Trump officials who included a journalist on a group chat about a highly sensitive bombing campaign.
I assumed that I was being spoofed or hoaxed.
Plus, a Muslim woman speaks out days after a suspect tried to light her hijab on fire inside a Toronto area library. And is your genetic data on the line?
You could be potentially exposed in ways we're just beginning to understand.
What steps you should consider taking after DNA testing company 23andMe files for bankruptcy protection.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. At the end of the first full day of the election campaign, and early in this race, leaders are making pitches aimed at saving voters money. So far, it's in the form of tax breaks. CTV's Mike LeCouture starts us off with a breakdown of the promises and what they mean for you.
We're cutting the ham and the taxes so that you can bring home the bacon.
A play on words to underscore a significant promise. If elected, Pierre Poilievre will cut taxes at the lowest income rate. And to pay for it, he's eyeing government savings.
We will be cutting bureaucracy, cutting consultants, cutting back on handouts to insiders, and we will cut back on foreign aid to bring our money home to this country.
Liberals are also proposing a tax cut for people who earn just under $58,000 a year. Conservatives claim their plan would save a two-income family $1,800 annually. The Liberal cut is smaller and would see that same family save $825 a year. But Carney claims the Conservative plan will mean program cuts.
He said, and now he's backed it up with initiative, that he will eliminate, not just cut, eliminate childcare, eliminate dental care, eliminate pharmacare. He still doesn't have enough to pay. He's going to eliminate foreign aid.
Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet questions how both the Liberals and Conservatives intend to fund their proposals.
I don't have to compete with that, but let me say something. How the hell do you intend to do that?
Still, some tax experts believe there's another option parties should be exploring.
The more necessary or more useful tax cuts would actually be on the business side in order to stimulate more investment and improve Canada's productivity record.
While in Montreal, Jagmeet Singh used a plot of land he visited 4 years ago on the election campaign to promise the NDP will use federal land to build more than 100,000 rent-controlled homes over the next decade.
Our plan is to use every bit of federal land that's usable to build homes that are 100% affordable.
Expect affordability to be a central theme of the campaign, with leaders trying to prove they have the best plan to protect Canada in the event of a recession caused by a trade war with the United States. Omar.
Mike, thank you. Let's bring in CTV's chief political correspondent, Vassy Kapelos now. And Vassy, in the first 2 days of this campaign, the two frontrunners have pledged tax cuts. But is there a risk there that that could chip away at any kind of contingency planning in the face of Donald Trump's tariff threat?
Yeah, there's a huge risk, Omar. It's a great point. I mean, these are expensive promises, $6 billion, $14 billion. How are they going to pay for it? There's some details at the margin on the outskirts, but not a lot of specifics. They're promising a costed platform going forward. But obviously, if you're going to need a lot of money to address what happens with Trump's tariffs, that means less money for other things. I will also say from a strategic perspective, people I talked to on the Carney campaign are a bit peeved that the Conservatives were able to get the messaging out so clearly on affordability, that the first days of the campaign focused more on affordability than Trump, which has worked so well for them over the past few weeks.
And Vassy, we also found out today the dates for the federal leaders debate. April 16th for the French one, April 17th for the English face-off, both of those debates in Montreal. But a third debate has been canceled. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this was a private French broadcaster, TVA. They had a face-to-face debate in the last election that went pretty well. In this instance, Mark Carney this morning said that why not? Yes, we'll participate, essentially. And later in the day, the campaign clarified that no, that they wouldn't. And so the debate's being canceled because they had actually asked parties to help pay for the cost of it. His opposition, all the other parties are saying it's because he's afraid that he, doesn't essentially want to debate them in French because of some wobbly language skills. His party insists that that's not the case, that they will be there for the official French one. Omar?
All right, Vashi, thank you for this tonight. Alberta's Premier defended today comments she recently made on a conservative media outlet.
But I'm on Team Alberta, and I know that Team Alberta means doing everything we possibly can to support our energy industry.
Danielle Smith denies urging the U.S. to interfere in the federal election. Earlier this month, she told Breitbart News to pause Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods because they were bolstering support for the Liberals ahead of the campaign.
The longer this dispute goes on, politicians posture, and it seems to be benefiting the Liberals right now. Let's just put things on pause so we can get through an election.
Smith's comments drew fire from critics who accused her of trying to exert pressure on the U.S. to influence the outcome of the Canadian election. But Canada's chief electoral officer today said she broke no laws. U.S. tariffs are still expected to kick in for Canada and other American trading partners on April 2nd. But now Donald Trump says he may give some countries a pass.
Well, I may give a lot of countries breaks, but it's reciprocal, but we might be even nicer than that. We've been very nice to a lot of countries for a long time, but I call it Liberation Day. April 2nd is Liberation Day.
Trump did not say who would be spared, but he did announce any countries buying oil and gas from Venezuela will be hit with an additional 25% tariff. Federal party leaders are also trying to establish themselves as the best candidate to defend Canadian sovereignty. CTV's Judy Trin takes a look at their strategies.
Newfoundland and Labrador, the first province Mark Carney is visiting during the election, and where he's trying out his stump speech.
Donald Trump wants to break us so America can own us.
The message hit home during Carney's second stop. He met with two women in Gander who took in stranded American and Irish passengers on 9/11.
So you really are inspirations for all of us in Canada, and a reminder of we're better together.
38 planes were diverted to Gander after the U.S. closed its airspace following the terror attacks. The airport became a temporary home for more than 6,000 travelers.
Canada, Canada, Canada.
As hundreds gathered to greet the Conservative leader at his opening rally, they came clutching symbols of Canada. Like Carney, Pierre Poilievre is trying to convince voters that he's the one who can stop Donald Trump's attempt to annex Canada.
We will build out the vision of an East-West nation that John A. brought to this country. He was the first to stand up and say, we are not Americans, we are Canadian.
Jagmeet Singh is trying to fight back against the assertion that this is a two-horse race by questioning if the words of Liberals and Conservatives match their action.
Pierre Poilievre showed up to a factory, literally a factory where workers had been fired because of the tariffs, and his announcement was a tax cut for big business. And Mark Carney has been the Prime Minister now and found time to go to Europe. He found time to meet with the King.
Just how persuasive the leaders are will be closely watched in this province. In Newfoundland and Labrador, there are 7 seats up for grabs, and in 5 ridings, there are no incumbents. Judy Trin, CTV News, Gander, Newfoundland.
Bombshell revelations today of highly sensitive U.S. military strategy shared on a group chat with members of the U.S. cabinet and a top magazine editor who says he was accidentally added to the classified conversation. The Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg says at first he thought he was being spoofed.
Because it was simply too improbable to me that they would have such poor operational security as to inadvertently invite the editor of The Atlantic into a national security discussion about the timing of a bombing campaign.
The details emerged days before U.S. fighter jets took off in the Red Sea for strikes against Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen and communicated on the commercial messaging app Signal. Goldberg says he was inadvertently added by the U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz on the chat. That also included the U.S. Vice President, Secretary of State, Defense Secretary, the CIA Director, and the Director of National Intelligence, and included precise information about weapons packages, targets, and timing, shocking members of the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Holy crap. And this isn't the first time we've seen this sloppiness from this administration.
Tonight, Trump and the defense secretary responded.
I don't know anything about it.
Nobody was texting war plans.
The U.S. National Security Council says the chat appears to be authentic, adding that we are reviewing how an inadvertent number was added to the chain, and there were no threats to our service members or national security. And one of the people on that group chat, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, is heading to Greenland this week in a visit that is being slammed by its outgoing prime minister as, quote, highly aggressive, and the incoming leader as showing a lack of respect after Donald Trump suggested the U.S. take it over.
And I think Greenland's going to be something that maybe is in our future. I think it's important. It's important from the standpoint of international security.
The U.S. Second Lady Usha Vance is also going to Greenland to watch a dog sled race. Greenland, located between the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans, is the world's biggest island and has been controlled by Denmark for about 300 years. The streets of Turkey have been rocked with the country's biggest protests in more than a decade over the jailing of Istanbul's mayor and the president's main rival on corruption charges, which he denies. Turkey's opposition calls the charges politically motivated. Turkey's president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, calls the demonstrations, quote, evil. More than 1,000 people have been detained and dozens of police officers have been injured. There are calls for a hate crime investigation tonight after a Muslim woman wearing a hijab was nearly lit on fire in an Ontario library. CTV's Adrian Gobriel on the alleged attack, the first statement from the victim, and the suspect, we are learning, was known to police.
This calm, quiet public library east of Toronto was the weekend scene of a disturbing alleged assault.
A Muslim woman wearing hijab was attacked inside the Ajax Public Library, splashing her with liquid and trying to set her on fire.
The victim, still too scared to speak publicly, allowed her written statement to be read by this community leader.
Every time I close my eyes, the incident replays over and over again.
It was Saturday afternoon when a mother was sitting down at this library when it's alleged a woman began yelling at her as she tried to set the victim's hijab on fire.
The fear that an incident like this could happen to my daughters keeps me awake at night and shakes my confidence in the safety of our community spaces.
The victim says she began to scream and security came to her aid as the alleged suspect struggled to get her lighter to work. Thankfully, her hijab wasn't set on fire. Police say they've arrested 25-year-old Kaylee Ann Fryer. A source with the town of Ajax tells CTV News Fryer was arrested in October for swinging a machete at a man across the street from the same library. While violent, it's unclear if the previous alleged assault also targeted a member of the Muslim community.
What we are asking the police force to do is to take this incident seriously and to address this incident as a hate-motivated crime.
There have been a number of violent attacks on Muslim Canadians across the country over the last decade, from the Quebec mosque shooting in 2017 to the targeted van attack that killed a family of 4 in London, Ontario.
This violent incident comes at a time when election campaigns are getting underway. The National Council of Canadian Muslims are calling on all political parties to release a public plan to combat Islamophobia and hate. Adrian Gobriel, CTV News, Ajax, Ontario.
Coming up.
If it falls into the wrong hands, you could be potentially exposed in ways we're just beginning to understand.
What happens to your personal data after a multi-billion-dollar genetics company goes bankrupt? Plus, where this high-speed cow chase tied up traffic. There is a growing reckoning in France over sexual violence, and actor Gérard Depardieu's sexual assault trial is now at the heart of the movement. The towering figure of French cinema was in the courtroom today. The actor has faced numerous allegations of sexual assault over his career, but this is the first time Depardieu has stood trial. If found guilty, the actor could face up to 5 years in jail. And outside the courtroom, dozens of women's rights demonstrators chanted slogans of support for the plaintiffs. Depardieu is accused of groping 2 women on set. The trial expected to last 2 days. And U.S. President Donald Trump is calling this portrait truly the worst and wants it removed from the Colorado state capitol, saying he would prefer not having a picture than having this one. 23andMe is one of several genetics testing companies that exploded in popularity with people looking to learn more about their ancestry. The company, which has the DNA of millions, has now filed for bankruptcy protection in the U.S. CTV's Andrew Johnson looks into the concerns over what happens to all that customer data.
If you are one of the millions who have sent away a sample of your saliva to DNA testing company 23andMe, you've entrusted them with the most personal of information.
This is not a password. This is not some easily changeable personal information. You cannot change your genetic data. And so if it falls into the wrong hands, you could be potentially exposed in ways we're just beginning to understand.
23andMe has filed for bankruptcy protection to facilitate a sale. Demand for its ancestry testing kits has dropped. In the event the company is sold, experts are raising serious questions about privacy. They say what happens to 23andMe's massive DNA database could depend on the buyer.
It could be used, for example, by an insurance company to deny you coverage. It could be used to deny you employment or to terminate your employment. It could be used in immigration cases if it falls into the hands of law enforcement agencies.
23andMe is telling customers there will be no changes to the way it protects their DNA under its existing privacy policy. But
those policies can change. It's hard for people to be able to predict or control how their information is used in the future.
if you're a 23andMe customer, you can protect yourself now by logging into your account, downloading your data, then selecting to permanently delete it from the company's database. Andrew Johnson, CTV News, Vancouver.
Still ahead, are the deals worth the lineups? What shoppers are saying about the hunt for bargains at the Bay's first liquidation sales. Liquidation sales started today at all but 6 Hudson's Bay locations across Canada after the company filed for creditor protection earlier this month. CTV's Mike Walker on the demand for deals and whether shoppers are walking away with bargains.
Shoppers eager for deals lining up outside the Bay long before the doors open.
I came to see if I could get any good deals. I love the Bay. I shopped at the Bay for over 30 years.
Canada's oldest company liquidating almost all of its stores over the next several weeks before they permanently shutter. For some shoppers, it's bittersweet.
I know it's not owned by a Canadian, but still, the history's here.
I know online shopping is the end thing to do, but as a senior, I find it still great to see big stores.
The liquidation comes after the courts ruled the Bay can begin selling off its inventory after filing for creditor protection. Shoppers say stores appear much busier. At this outlet location, there are already bare shelves and store closing signs posted.
I don't see nothing that I would like to there in the long line. It's just ridiculous.
But at other stores, confusion for shoppers who say they are being told sales start tomorrow.
I asked one of the salespeople and they said, no sales today.
Retail experts say don't expect big discounts right away, rather over time.
They have an obligation to the creditors to try and actually optimize the value of that inventory. And there's about $315 million worth of inventory.
3 stores in the Toronto area and 3 stores in Quebec have been spared from liquidation for now after the company saw a boost in sales.
There may be at some point a creditor that comes to the table and says, we'll give you a lifeline. Or perhaps that a buyer comes to the table and says, hey, before you liquidate those 6 remaining stores, we will take them.
Amid the buying frenzy, more than 9,000 employees face layoffs.
I do hope they're able to save the 6. That's not even certain.
As part of the liquidation, the company is accepting gift cards until April 6, but loyalty points cannot be used. Hudson's Bay has said the liquidation process will wrap up on June 15th, and the company plans to vacate the stores by the end of June. Mike Walker, CTV News, Toronto.
And before we go to break, wild scenes fit for a ranch broke out on a Texas highway. Police officers playing cowboys chasing down cattle that broke loose from a trailer leaving the Houston rodeo and snarling traffic earlier today. Some brave drivers tried to help to corral the cows, trained to avoid getting caught. Quite the scene. Still ahead, kicking off the campaign conversation with voters in Alberta. During this election, we'll take you to communities large and small to hear directly from Canadians about what they want from their next government. Tonight, we start in Red Deer, Alberta, about halfway between Calgary and Edmonton, with CTV's Kathy Lee.
The third largest city in Alberta, Red Deer is a bustling crossroads for travelers and commerce. And the highway, its lifeline, hums in the distance from the quiet charm of this ranch.
We have light horses for trail rides. We have heavy horses for carriage rides.
With Canadians going to the polls in 5 weeks, Joel Martins wants more support for small businesses.
I think we're seriously overregulated in a lot of areas, which makes it difficult for production and new business to start.
There is a diverse mix of businesses in Red Deer. The city's economy is a rich tapestry, weaving together thriving sectors like agriculture, oil and gas, manufacturing, and retail. And on any given day, people from many of those sectors gather at Martin's restaurant. On their minds, what the next prime minister needs to prioritize.
The priorities has to be the economy first and foremost.
I think that affordability is really important right now.
I kind of feel healthcare also needs a little bit more intervention.
Recent polls show a tight race between the Liberals and the Conservatives.
It's not going to be an easy 4 years for anybody.
With the tariff war and threats to the country's sovereignty straining the relationship with Canada and the United States, the uncertainty and turmoil is worrisome. But at least for some people here, amidst the tension,
I'd like to see just some more positive energy in the country.
There remains something to hope for. Kathy Lee, CTV News, Red Deer, Alberta.
And before we say goodnight, my wife Aisha and I want to extend our deepest gratitude to you and to my work family here at CTV News for your beautiful and touching messages on the birth of our daughter, Isla Noor. It has made a joyous moment in our lives that much more incredible. And from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. See you tomorrow.